There is major uproar after the depiction of a very revered moment in Christianity, which is called the Last Supper. This was represented on stage during the opening ceremony with the help of drag queens and transgenders. There was also nudity at display. This has angered a lot of traditionalists and purists, including religious heads. Those who conform to strict Christian values have been outraged by this depiction of the Last Supper. The organizers say this is drawn from the painting of Leonardo da Vinci's Last Supper. It's supposed to be a work of art. But how are religious heads, how are people who are associated with Christianity, who head religious bodies, reacting to it? I am now joined by Father Anthony Charanghat, who is the former Director and Spokesperson of the Archdiocese of Bombay. Very good afternoon, Father Anthony. Good to have you with me here on Viewpoints.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. I'm happy to
I
share
would
my
like
details.
Absolutely. I would like to just begin by asking you the question that everyone is asking at the moment: is the depiction of Last Supper during the Paris Olympics opening ceremony blasphemous in your view?
I have heard about it for the last 2 days. I've also
Yes.
heard the opinion of big theologians and leaders of the Catholic Church around the world about it. My contribution would be that it is a picture which is eclectic, an artwork or a presentation which is eclectic. It definitely takes on the contours to the Last Supper, which is a very sacred picture for Christians, which signifies love, sacrificial love, true love, not just love that is indulged by in the material world, of just giving yourself without, enjoying things without giving yourself, without sacrifice. So that
Right.
picture is little bit, it is tarnished by the having it with drag queens and the rest of the world, which is symbolic of the material pleasure that man wants.
Yes. Right.
So, so that has been the controversy that's happened in the church. I also have read the response of the artist or whoever uh, contributed or directed the scene. It
Yes.
is what I call a kish. Kish means taking on uh, things from Renaissance art like Michelangelo. Definitely, there are scenes that show they have taken the whole configuration from the Last Supper. Therefore, it can
Yes.
be identified as the Last Supper. The person, of course, they say is uh, one of their gods, the Olympus gods. I forget his name. Is said over there, and
Yes.
he's hmm, so he's supposed to be a god of
Is it
enjoy.
Dionysus?
Yes, Dionysus, exactly.
Yes.
So Dionysus, and it was their thinking at that time. God gives you pleasure and enjoyment. So that is one worldview. The Catholic worldview is different. So, and it's being held in Paris, which was a very deep Catholic country. It was called the
Absolutely.
early sister of the Catholic Church. And so
Hmm.
some of the priests are horrified. But we also have the teaching of Christ that we are ready to forgive people if they didn't intend to do the thing. The
Okay.
author or the creator of the scene says he didn't have any intention to do it. But if it is replete with pictures that speaks of a teaching directly opposite the teaching of the church and using the main motto, the main motive of Renaissance picture of Da Vinci, which shows the Last Supper where Jesus is that, the little glow around him, but with a different glow symbolizing Dionysus. Dionysus,
Yes.
and also
Hmm.
the world of pleasure that at that age he enjoyed. So that is a little bit incongruent with the church's teaching. We understand the world has different views. We
Okay.
understand that the world is there, but we do not agree that ultimately man, also, so they call the woke generation, they have
Yes.
the habit of saying that we decide what are moral values, nobody else. That is contrary to the teaching of
Hmm.
the church, that we do not
Hmm.
decide, it's God who decides. We are free, but we are free to choose good and evil. There is good and evil. If you
Correct.
just concentrate on yourself, you become slaves of your egoistic pleasure. And egoistic pleasures suffocate you. It does not make you really contributory to a synodal living. That means a living of community, living of union. It always has strife. So that is the reason strife has arisen from this. So we are
Yes.
hurt. It seems many have said that it hurts our sentiments, religious sentiments. So, but we are ready to
Right.
forgive too. Ready to forgive.
You are of course somebody who is looking at it as a bigger person. You want to rise above, the triviality of it. You are even willing to cut them some slack and say, okay, if this is a work of art, or if their intention was not to hurt religious sentiments, as the organizers have said, you're willing to sort of extend your compassion and your understanding. But my question to you is, you mentioned that France is actually a Catholic society. So a lot of LGBT icons are now saying that this is actually pretentious. To begin with, France is not so permissive, and then on a global stage, you're projecting something that you are not. Do you see a dichotomy? Do you see a contradiction there?
Yes, it was a Catholic, uh, in the early sister of the Catholic Church, I said. As it
Hmm.
grows, all countries, even Catholic countries, are shedding their faith because of the materialistic impact on the world. I've also been on the censor board, and I've always made this point. If you say that you glorify, you know, lust, and if you glorify robbery, and if you glorify violence, and then come with a one line saying, we don't have this teaching of God, which is all important for the whole of humanity. All, if you look into your hearts, has a desire to follow what is the truth, what is love in the true sense of the word. So that is there. And to go against this is what is the teaching of the church. But we understand that God, our Lord is also forgiving and pardons it. In fact, today's reading of the gospel says that the Lord has merciful love. Even when we don't have it, He's ready to offer us the grace of love. And so we always look to God. Look to God for forgiveness. He's an ever forgiving God till the last breath of our lives. But we get a chance right to. So we don't blanket condemn anybody. We forgive them and we hope that they will see the light. They are free to choose what they want because freedom is important for real good. You can't say somebody is good without his freedom. If you force something, there is no virtue, there is no goodness. So that is the teaching of the church, and that is a fundamental teaching which we do not want to. Of course, there are some people who are orthodox, some people who are liberal. I might be called a libertine, to free a priest, radically free. But I see the whole comprehensive teaching of the Bible has to be taken into consideration.
I made no mistake. The fact that there were drag queens and trans women in depiction, same-sex relations are something that was depicted with a sense of, I would say, understanding and acceptability, perhaps to let the world know that it is high time we become accepting of this community. As we all know, it's the LGBTQ community that is being depicted through these characters. Religion, Christianity, across religions, same sex relations are not acceptable, are not endorsed. What, according to your view, then would be, what would you say to those people? Some would say that this is a direct threat to religion. This is actually an act of defiance towards
So
religion.
I make a distinction between the person and the value. The person is never rejected. The values, we unconditionally say that what is intrinsically evil is evil. But the
Mhm.
way, because people are subject to the use of their freedom, it can be influenced by anything, depends upon the circumstances of their life, depends upon a lot of health conditions. All these things are mitigating factors. So
Okay.
that is there. But the more you reach out in forgiveness, the more conversion takes place. When you take a radical opposite stand, that creates, antagonism and a close down to accept each other's views. That is the cause of all conflict in the world.
It's beautifully said, and I think I will remember it. What you just said about how you must remove the person from the values practice, because a lot of factors contribute to those values, and one must not, therefore, entirely dismiss such people and entirely distance such people, rather try and reach out to them, perhaps. That's a very, passionate way of looking at it. But again, wokeism, you brought up that word. It's a new phase perhaps among the young, among the youth across the globe. Like you mentioned in your very opening comments, they believe that no one tells us what to do. Our bodies, our choices, our sexual orientation cannot be dictated because we know ourselves the best, and there cannot be a one size fits all diktat, so to speak. How would you respond to them? And there are many in that sense who are welcoming this, as an expression of wokeism.
Yeah, we always forget one way of explaining God always accepted the sinner for us. God always forgave the sinner. So we accept them in that way. But it is
Mhm.
also our duty to teach that freedom doesn't mean to be a libertine, to use things that destroy you. So we
Okay.
cannot dis- I mean, separate ourselves from expressing the truth. So these are the
Mhm.
two things are there. And we hope as we progress, God himself, in the Garden of Eden, the
Yes.
story of Milton, the story of Dante, they all show how God told them what was right and how we are made to know God, to love him and to be happy with him forever. If we converse with God and not to converse with that very graphic story of
Hmm.
knowing things of good and evil, which is always trying to, keeping us on a side which does not give us the truth fully. So that's all the
Yes.
temptation that we have. If you know a little of Christianity, you know the stories. And most of the religions, whether it's Hinduism, whether it's Islamism, whether it's Judaism, all have this in the original stories. You have to go to have a anthropological history of things, and you see how people have moved, how geology, politics, geology, governance, spirituality, all have put us in this potpourri of which we have to extricate ourselves from. This is the journey of faith that we all have to do. That is my thing. Because
Right.
by saying
But
one
is
statement,
faith, Father Anthony, is faith above mockery? Would you also go to the extent of saying, to those who are saying that it's a mockery of Christianity, one of the most revered moments of Christianity is being depicted in this manner, with nudity, with menage a trois, with things like which are not clearly not accepted in religious scriptures, or rather being taught as sin, are being depicted on stage. Do you see this as a mockery of religion, or would you say that faith, after all, has to be above all mockery?
that's true. Faith has to be above all for forgiveness. But of course, there are people who want to be, when they see there is a stubborn this thing to hang on to it, they have to talk forcefully. This is the vocabulary in which we try to impress people. Only when people hear strong words are they awakened from their slumber or their, what do you call, they are giving into everything or their ease of life. So unless
Hmm.
you are shaken up, always you find in literature, I'm also a student of literature, you have to use sometimes words forcefully to make an impact on people. So that is there when you awaken them. And then they come to awaken. Now I know that whole thing. Every religion comes to a state of awareness, a state of being awakened. That is religion, to be awakened to our constant ways of being dependent purely on the material things, the things that destroy. All matter destroys. And so we are living. So if we cling on to these things, are only instruments for us. I don't say it's good per se, but it's a means. All things are means. Don't make means an end. So the means and the end has to be distinguished. That is my
As I see it, Father Anthony, and correct me if I'm wrong, I see someone in you who's not at all enraged or outraged by any of this. You probably look at it and you think that, okay, may they attain that level of awareness or awakening which you just mentioned, but you don't seem to be enraged. You don't seem to be outraged like many of your other Christian brothers. What would you say is the reason for that?
So each one has his own perspective. I leave freedom to everybody. They have their
Hmm.
perspective. I try to tell them because Pope Francis is a typical example of being totally, you know, au Quran. He's
Hmm.
with the latest. He says we have to reach out. That is Christ. We have to reach out to the forgiver. He lets the rain
Okay.
and the sun shine on the good and the evil. It takes time. Today, there's a gospel parable where there's a garden where there is darner and there's good wheat. So do we pull it out together? So some people said, should we go and pull it out, Master? He said, no, let them go because it's a time given for us, God's merciful time. And He gives you also what we call another concept of grace, that a help is needed because we are a stained people after the fall of Adam and Eve. Our great scriptures tell us that the only person who lived was the mother of God because she was the grace who cooperated with the grace. It's collaboration with the grace of God that brings about. So that is our mission. The good news is that God is still merciful. God still loves you to the end. As long as you have life, you have a chance. He's constantly giving you this pardon. He's constantly giving you this mercy. Mercy is not pity. Mercy is a gift of God's love in your life. If you close yourself
Right.
to God's mercy, to the Spirit of God, that would be a sin that is deadly.
It also means, at least to me, and I have spoken to a lot of religious clerics, priests of various religions, and what I find is that, again, this is something you might have heard, that Christianity, or people like yourself who are well read, who are also very aware of how society is growing and evolving, who's more accepting of the young people and their mindsets, would say this is something you could only do with the Christians. Imagine any other religion, and there would have been riots, there would have been clashes. Is it because those guardians of religion like you have preached a certain way of practicing it, that today you don't see? I mean, of course you would online read a lot of outrage, but beyond that, it's not as if there's been clashes on ground, or anything has been brought down from stage on that very day. How is it that people can take this liberty with Christianity, but with no other religion this is possible?
I think the very important quality is to look at your own life. My life has gone through a lot of stages of life. I come from Dogri, from the underworld. I come from things that have been exposed to almost everything as a young boy, I've been involved in all this. I was in Dongri, Bombay. I was exposed to the worst possible movies that you could have. All these things
Hmm.
are there. But it has taught me. Of course, not that I have been a paragon of virtue. I have gone through these things and I've had to turn away from these things. When you reflect, when you pray, prayer is an inspiration from God. There is a God. The whole world that wants intelligence will find that they have no answers to think finally.
Hmm.
And they say the concept of God is irrational. The
Hmm.
concept of God is what rationality wants us wants us as the final answer. There is a God who has no beginning, no end, who is real, who is full truth, who is full love. That is the revelation of people if they seek God, whether it's Buddhists, whether it's uh, Muslim people, but uh, or Jews, or total people who believe atheism. If they search their
Yes.
hearts, that means that search your hearts, and you will find God. There are various methods of searching God. We believe that because Christ comes as the Word of God, we have a whole theology that makes us feel very convinced by the Word of God. The Word is the knowledge of God. Unless you have the intelligence of God, unless you look at the world and you see only an almighty intelligence has created the thing. People like scientists say, we come to a certain point, there are certain gurus who will say, after that, we don't know what is. It is just emptiness. That could be an irrational world. The world that wants rationality will finally say everything is Maya or everything is irrational. And it's a philosophy of pessimism. We are a philosophy of joy because if there is a good God, He will definitely take us to goodness, but He gives you the freedom to accept it or not. That is justice. If you don't accept it, then you pay the consequences of distancing. God doesn't punish you. Your being with God, being close to God, gives you the joy. Your going away from God is you punish yourself. He gives you freedom. Therefore, religion should always have this freedom. You go away, you pay the consequences of your sin because you go away. Ultimately, and there is no materiality, there's only God's spiritual reality. He's the one who alone is there. And our connection is because we are not infinite, we are finite. Our joy comes within a relationship with Him. All religion means relationship with God. It's not just teachings or anything, it's having a personal relationship in prayer, a communal relationship in community. But we have been tarnished by the world, we also of the world, and by the first angelic creature who said, I am God. That is the basis of all religion. That's what we call satanic. So satanic is he's infinite because he was spiritual creation. He has no limit and therefore he's powerful. He can do things with us. But God gives us his grace, his merciful grace. That is the teaching of Christ. So that is, we believe in this.
Right.
And I think religions, if they dig deep, they will find that this concept of grace is there in everybody. So I hope we all
Right.
discover it. We are on a journey towards God, and I want everybody to journey.
So,
And
if
people
I'm
are,
understanding you correctly, are you looking at people who have indulged in this? It could be an expression of art, it could be Workism, it could be trying to, adapt Leonardo da Vinci's painting and make it an interesting spectacle. Uh, are you saying that it could be that some of them have gone astray, gone away from God, gone away from religion, and you would leave it to them, leave it to the mercy of God for them to come back and realize it? Is that what you're saying? Am I understanding you
yes,
correctly?
yes, I'm saying that, but without failing to make the point that
Hmm.
it is not the ultimate way of just doing
Okay.
what you want. Hmm? I have
Right.
to make
Okay.
myself very
So
clear about
some
this.
guardrails must be there. Some boundaries must be there, and you feel that it is all there. It is only about one awakening oneself, making oneself aware of where one should limit oneself, and not just let everything be about pleasure or indulgence or temptation. Is perhaps what you indicated. But I want to ask. Sure. Please go ahead.
It's not just freedom for the sake of freedom, doing what you want. The freedom is given to
And
you to get the best of your out. You choose the best thing. There is good and evil. So you choose the good thing. So that is the thing. So I
but
don't
but
deny.
but are you talking about homosexuality then as a expression of freedom, or are you willing to accept that it could be something that maybe religion does not account for, but given what you see around in society, would you be somebody who is willing to accept the community as legitimate, as having their right to exercise the choice of who they love, how they love? Would you be somebody who would say that?
To Because see, their concept of freedom there is not my concept of freedom. Freedom is for
Hmm.
good, not to do what you want and destroy yourself. That is what I want to make. That is the
That
thing.
is amazing, Father Anthony. That's really amazing. Somebody in your position to be able to say that. To be able
Because
to
see,
say that. I
I
really
have been on the
appreciate
censor board. I have been on the censor board of the film division. I remember Raj Khosla telling me, "You have really taught us what are the principles of
it. Yes.
censorship." So you can't, constantly impact their minds, their feelings, their sensations, and not make them slaves of what you're showing on the movie. Because it has to be an internal also teaching, not just a last tip. Doesn't make an impact at all by saying these things are wrong and these things. I
So
often
you
see
are
movies.
against moral policing. You are somebody who is against
Yeah,
imposition and against moral policing. You want it to
yeah.
come from within. And unless
Come
that
from within
happens, nobody can
by
really
guiding, by guiding them.
by
You can't
guiding
just
them.
let them be. I'm not saying that's give them total liberty in habits.
I understand. Right.
So
So we
that's a
need custodians, we
middle part.
need guardians.
That's another phrase called virtus set in medio in Latin. Virtue stands in the middle, not on the extreme or the other extreme. You don't become
Correct.
a ritualistic, you don't make a fetish out of religion, you don't make a thing, but you take the best out of religion, of all religions, in that effect, whether it is Workism,
Yes.
whether it's atheism, whether it's agnostics, Gnostics. Because I've studied that for the priesthood, so we have done all these things. We have studied all religions, atheism, and all the philosophers and all the theologians of all religions. So we have some knowledge. Perhaps we have failed. Many of us, I myself, must have had a long life, and God has given me enlightenment towards as you grow old. That's it. I've seen
Yes.
everything, and that's it.
Right. One last question to you then. Again, it has to be about the Last Supper since this entire conversation is around that. Uh, would you be willing to accept this if you were there in person? Say this plays out in front of you. Would you walk out? Or would you be somebody who will just accept it as a depiction of art?
No, I would not go because if I give a presence showing that I am approving this thing, because that my presence over there would say that I approve it's okay for anybody to do anything. So it will give a wrong message.
Mhm.
So in that respect, I
Okay.
will not go there, but I have seen it. I can
No,
guide
but you
people
didn't
to a
know.
point.
Suppose it plays out unexpectedly. What would you do? Would you walk out?
Because people, religious sentiments were offended. There also
Okay.
seem to be a this thing. If you notice, there's also ridiculing and the humor that is there, you
Hmm.
know,
Hmm. Hmm.
and the thing showing that children are there, the children used for sex, the, the god of this thing in a, it's also a distorting of the religious message that is iconic of the Catholic faith, which is the Last Supper, where God
True.
shows that He has come to break His body for us and to shed His blood on the cross. When we give ourselves in love, it is in self giving that we have
Hmm.
more life. We can give life. Even the marriage act itself is giving of self to other. You cannot have a marriage act without total giving of self. And that is why marriage act of uh, full giving of sex to one another is restricted to the sacred sacrament of matrimony, which is a sign of God's total giving of self to us and our total giving. That gives us more life. That is the resurrection we believe. That is the ultimate light we are all seeking. That is the thing. That is the journey.
Right. So very interesting. You're not judgmental of those who don't align with your views. Yet
But I
you
don't
are
want to
saying
have a wrong
that
message.
it's a distortion
Yeah,
from where you
because people
stand
can
and
point
how
to
you
me,
see
I'm
it.
Father
Hmm.
Tony with my youth. I have plenty of youth all over the world. They keep in touch with me on my paper, but
Hmm.
they always ask me questions. But if I am there kind of enjoying the scene and all, it gives the wrong message. I
I
could
get
be
that.
there observing it for, I have to give a guidance to the people. So I have to see it. I cannot make a judgment without knowing the facts.
Without seeing it. So you would see it, you will try and understand it, but you will make your disapproval clear and you will explain it as your position, as your stand. You will not impose it or force it on anyone else. Did I
Indeed.
get you correctly, Father Anthony?
Yes, very true.
Thank you so much, and such a pleasure talking to you. I got a clear perspective of where you stand on the matter, and I'm sure it'll help a lot many others who are confused where they stand, who don't know whether they approve of this or they
Yeah.
should denounce it, or whether they should call it out as mockery. I think we spoke about all these aspects and you explained it beautifully. Father Anthony Charanghat, thank you so much for joining us on Viewpoint.
Thank you so much.